2026 marks 10 years of me living in Iceland, and it literally feels like yesterday that I moved here, stepped off the plane, started working, and was just bombarded by all of these seemingly foreign and kind of strange things, even down to how Icelanders say their names, like Ása or Björn or Arnbjörn. Like, my brain was overwhelmed. There was a lot going on. Fast forward a decade, and the things that at that time I found to be extremely unusual and hard to take in or get a chance to really absorb now are just normal to me. It's everyday life. But I realized that for many people who are learning about Iceland, planning to come here, that sharing some of the things that I thought were strange but are normalized to me might help you understand a little bit more about the country and, of course, the experience of living here. So these are the 10 things that have become normalized to me over the last decade, and I'll do my best to kind of give some context and explanation about them. But if you want any more further explanation about something or are not sure, just curious, feel free to leave a comment below, a question, or even comment on something that you found to be interesting, because I'd love to hear it and we can kind of engage down there. The first and probably most controversial of them all is letting babies nap outside. And this is something that I knew about during my first visit in 2013 when I came to Iceland in the wintertime. It definitely was not something that I felt okay with and could not understand how this was normalized. It is only up until recently, so 2025, when I had a baby, so I'm a first time mom, that I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll try it. So Holly's mom taught us how to wrap her up to make sure she's nice and warm, but also getting that like fresh air outside. And it has totally changed the game, okay? So I know that many people feel triggered when I talk about this, but I am telling you the amount of sleep that she was getting, we're talking about 3 hours outside. She was only getting like 20 minutes inside on like a regular basis. And that was at the time when she was around like 6 months, 7 months. Having her nap outside was a game changer for us. It is not just in Iceland that people do this. There are other Nordic countries that do it. There are just other European countries in general where this is something that is practiced and okay. In the United States, definitely not. It's normalized to me. I see it all the time. You can walk down the street in most neighborhoods and potentially see a baby sleeping outside. Even downtown Reykjavik, when people are in cafes, you could see babies that are napping outside. So when you come here, just know that's okay. The baby is fine. There is somebody who is checking on the child, but I can definitely feel how people would be nervous about it or feel really strange about it, especially from the United States, because this is absolutely not possible there. Or at least not anymore, because I heard that it was happening back in the 50s and 60s. For the next one, we are technically in summer right now, but you would not think so considering that the temperature only usually goes up to a high of about 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 15 degrees Celsius. This is kind of what's expected on average. It can go higher and it can definitely go lower. I moved here in June of 2016, and I remember that it was around 60 degrees Fahrenheit and people were walking around in shorts and t-shirts and sandals. And I was like, what is wrong with people? It is not warm outside. I was wearing a sweater, a jacket, long pants, sneakers, all of that. I did not feel like it was warm. But over time, getting acclimated to the temperature and to winter and coming out of winter, 60 degrees started to feel warm. I was converted. And I was like, wow, this is nice. Like 60 degrees and the sun is out and there's no wind. Might as well be 80. It feels like it to me. And I didn't think my mind would ever change around that, especially that first summer. But things have changed for sure. And actually, which leads me to my next point about summer. So for the third one is that summer in Iceland is not guaranteed. Coming from New York, we have 4 seasons. Iceland technically is supposed to have 4 seasons. I say that there's 2. Winter and summer. My boyfriend jokes that there's 2, which is winter and fall because of the temperature. But I think, okay, yeah, technically we do have summer, but like fall, it's like 2 weeks long. And then spring is more about like more of daylight coming back, so longer days. But in New York, it is very distinct, these seasons. And summer, you know it's going to be warm or really hot. And coming from that type of mindset and coming to Iceland and talking about summer or hearing about it, and yes, I did visit during summer, but it's different. It's different when you live here. And the adventure of it all was amazing to see and like the journey. But I was cold, at least for 2 summers, because I think the next summer was actually not that nice. There were a lot more days where it was rainy, kind of like this summer. We hardly saw the sun. Yes, it's bright outside, but that's about it. So summer can be really rainy, hardly seeing the physical sun. You see the daylight, but not the sun itself, windy, and just feeling chilly, which to me does not feel like summer. And a lot of the time when this is happening, Icelanders just hightail it out of the country to like Tenerife or something to get a more consistent summer where the weather is more predictable and the sunshine and heat and all of that. Because, yeah, summer in Iceland, it does exist, but maybe it wants to show up, maybe not. For number 4, I'm still on the summer theme, which is 24-hour daylight during certain parts of the summer. I love it. But back when I first moved, not a fan. It was hard for me to sleep. I was wearing eye masks and trying to do all the things, but it just felt like my sleep was always disturbed. And I remember thinking to myself, how am I going to deal with this? Because I don't like how the eye masks fit. They're not comfortable. And I just felt like I'm trying my best to turn my brain off when it thinks that it's the middle of the day and it's time to go do things. I often felt really energized to just get out and stay up late. And mind you, I am one of those people that always stays up late anyway. So this is already a problem in terms of regulating any type of circadian rhythm. If you are coming to Iceland to visit and you have an eye mask, just try to find one of those that are like comfortable, maybe that has a cushion so it's not pressing on your eyelids. But for me, I didn't have it back then, and I just felt so tired a lot. I enjoyed summer and knowing that it was there because we didn't have too much snow or ice, but I still was just suffering. Eventually, it kind of just became normal to me, and I didn't think of it as a hindrance. Before having a baby, which disturbs your sleep anyway, I was able to rest all throughout the night during summer after a few years and just getting acclimated. So that was normalized. And when I tell it to people now that we have 24 hours of daylight, people look at me like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, the sun comes up, it hardly goes below the horizon to set. And a few hours later, because the sky is still bright, the sun is back up again. So we have 24-hour daylight, and it's wonderful, in my opinion. And as a contrast for number 5, we have only 4 hours of daylight in winter for our shortest day. And it feels like our shortest day goes on for many days in terms of the amount of hours, because once we hit our shortest day, which is December 21st, I believe, the time in terms of more daylight does start to increase, but it's slow and you feel it. And a lot of people suffer from winter depression in Iceland. So people assume that in Iceland, people are totally used to the fact that this happens. No, there are still people who were born and raised here who get symptoms of winter depression. I think it's called SAD. And that was something that definitely hit me my first winter. So that going 2016 into 2017, I ended up getting one of those lamps, the daylight lamps. I didn't end up liking that. I tried it, but it was just like, I felt like my pupils and eyes were just like being overstimulated. I had to find other ways in order to deal with winter and understand how I could survive this, because that's what it felt like. I felt like I was just like holding on until winter ended in order for me to be able to get to summer and feel like this release. Now, one thing that happened back in my first winter, like in 2017, is we were having like decent amount of snow that year, and then it stopped in like April, but May came around. It was the first week of May. I remember it so distinctively. I was living out in Mosfellsbæ, and it started snowing in May. I was mad, okay? Because I was like, I made it through winter. I really like toughed it out. And it had the audacity to snow in May. I was crushed, okay? Like, this was not something that was normal to me. It didn't feel okay. And I was like, this weather's playing games with me, and I'm not cool with it. So that is normal to me now, though. We've had snow showers in June. This has happened in recent years in the north in particular. and people were already on summer tires, so they weren't even equipped for all of that, because after a certain amount of time, believe it's in April, you have to take your winter tires off or you get like a big fine. And these fluke storms come through in Iceland. So when I say that it's varied and you need to come prepared, packing the right things, I mean it, because you just don't know what can happen. And part of the fun, of course, of living here, and that's what I've embraced, is that things can change, but not always in the way that you want. Okay? Icelandic weather has a mind of its own. Taking on this sort of relaxed þetterættast type of attitude. So þetterættast in Icelandic is, in essence, it would all work out. It'll all be okay. I've definitely adapted that. I've normalized that to deal with winter and the possibility of it lingering on. And of course, those dark days. Woo-wee! It can be a lot, but to me, I enjoy it because I have developed a system for me that works in order for me to not think about the dark days. That is the key, in my opinion, is to distract yourself enough and get enough fresh air, exercise, have a big project. Like, these are the things that I have worked on to cope with winter and has worked very well for me over the past 8 years. The first 2 years I had to figure it out, but once I did, I was all set. Number 6 is something that I still very much miss from the United States, or at least from other places when I go to visit outside of Iceland that have bigger grocery stores. And that is, in Iceland, we have a very limited amount of variety when it comes to produce, or, fruits, vegetables, all of that. And here it's like maybe 2 types of apples, an orange here, and in the Christmas time we have clementines, mandarin, oranges, and just like every once in a while we'll get some little variety, but for the most part the variety is so limited because we live on an island. We have to get things imported. It can be quite expensive, and the demand is probably not even there either. I mean, I know that there are other people like myself who enjoy the variety, but we also realize that there are circumstances around it as to why that's the case. It's normal to me now to shop for produce in Iceland, and also along with that limited variety, some of the stuff can be going bad, and you really have to check it. Even if you check it thoroughly, it might not mean that you still got something great, but it has gotten better over the years. That is for sure. And certain stores, in my opinion, do better than others, but none of them are perfect, and even the most expensive store can have produce that has gone bad that they're selling you. Iceland is interesting that way. When I go to the US, especially like Whole Foods, Sprouts, all these different stores, I am so elated. I am so excited to be there and like try all the different apples, get different oranges, just like pick peaches and plums and nectarines, and even vegetables like kale. Kale is grown in Iceland for decoration. You hardly ever see it in the store. I don't understand. Like, but the store, I want to buy it. It is crazy to me. And I know that a part of going away from Iceland, meaning to visit other places, is I get a chance to explore and enjoy foods that I can't get here. I don't take it as a negative, more so that it's just a normal part of life, and traveling allows me to kind of expand the offerings that are possible to me, and I really appreciate that. But when I have people come to visit and they're like, oh, what about this? I'm like, sorry, we don't have that. But we have this. We have this stuff right here. It might be a little bit limited, but it gets us through. It's fine. The next one is the Icelandic stare. Okay? I was not used to going around to places and people staring at me the way that Icelanders stare. It has been told to me that the reason why Icelanders are often staring at people is because they are looking to see if the person is familiar to them and they're curious. Like, it's kind of like a small town type of thing where like, oh, maybe that's Jon, or maybe that's Elsa, I don't know, whatever. Of course, for me, coming from a place like New York and everyone's really different, and you do not stare at people. That is rude, and it's almost like asking for trouble. To a place where it is so normal. Like, we're doing a stare down, it feels like at times, was hard. And I think it's helpful to understand that in Iceland, it is not like in the touristy areas where you're going to find this. I'm talking about in neighborhoods, like suburban areas where Icelanders are just kind of going about their normal life. And me having the color of chocolate, walking around at this time, I was living in Árbæ when I experienced this one thing in particular. It's possible the person was just surprised to see a black person walking in the neighborhood. I don't know. But I was walking down the street. I was coming from work. So I used to walk maybe like 20, 30 minutes from work. And a lady was in the car. I was the only one around at this time. Because I noticed it. Because I was like, oh, well, there's not really a lot of people, on the street or whatever. And there's a lady driving. And she's just like staring at me out the window like this, But like her eyes are just like locked on me. And she has her head turned to look at me. The road is here, And I'm looking at her because I see her looking at me because you can feel it when someone's like staring at you like this. And I'm looking around to be like, what happened? Something going on, And it's me. She's looking at me, right? and I was just like, why? Like, is it that unusual to see someone who looks like me walking on the street? I can't tell, or I don't know. She never stopped and said anything. I do know that Icelanders also stare at each other. So I'm not trying to say that it's only me, but at the time it felt really awkward. And the person's not smiling. They're not giving any expression. In fact, they looked like sort of angry. And I've been in the grocery store. Now, granted, that could be resting face. I understand. I'm just saying. It just felt really uncomfortable because I wasn't used to it. And in the grocery store, especially older Icelandic men, sometimes they would be staring and I turn my head and look and they're still just doing that. Eventually, I decided we're going to have a staring contest, okay? I'm going to be staring, you're going to be staring, and we'll see who stops staring first. I don't know. Like, it was just, I couldn't help it. I felt like this was my coping mechanism for it. Whether that's the right thing or not, I'm not saying it. I'm just getting at that's what happened, okay? Most of the time I'd win because I was not giving up. Because I was just like, I see you, Avi. And Avi means grandpa because this is the age I'm talking about, like 70, 80, just like in my face. And again, not smiling, like just straight face looking at me. I ended up making a video back in the day with Tabitha, a person who used to live here is also Black, talking about what it's like to be Black in Iceland. And we both were saying like, okay, we get it, Icelanders stare, but if you happen to catch like eyes, we lock eyes, please smile or something, because we don't know if that is like an unwelcomed stare or you're just curious or whatever, but it helps if you just smile. And I did notice that people started to smile who watched that video did end up like changing their behavior a little bit. Not everybody, but it was just really helpful to know that it was more welcoming, or at least I'm not being threatening towards you in any way, just curious about who you are and if I recognize you. The stare is so normal to me now that I don't even notice it half the time. I put on my New York blinders and I just go on about my life. I don't even look to see what they're seeing. Unless somebody says something, I'm just gonna go get my groceries, do whatever, and keep on going. Number 8 is having children out of wedlock and it being very normalized for people to have lives that they build together with their children and they don't end up marrying their partner till maybe way older. And that's mainly for purposes of just like having certain rights to like the house that you both were living in, depending on who owned it, if you both owned it or not, all that other jazz. Now, this was definitely not normal to me because when I moved to Iceland, I was already married and didn't have a child. And we ended up, my ex and I, we didn't have a child together. And when I got divorced, I wasn't planning on getting into a relationship and then having a baby outside of marriage, but it just was so normalized to me at the time that it didn't really matter. But beforehand, if someone had asked me like, or if it had been posed to me this thought of having a child out of wedlock, it wouldn't have felt like a normal, okay thing for me. Being in Iceland and seeing that people were just like, no big deal. It happens. And maybe those people stay together, maybe they don't. I mean, marriage already has pretty high divorce rate, but it was just fascinating to me that I sort of just naturally absorbed this as a thing and adapted to it. And then it became my life later on in terms of an example. Now, Holly and I do plan on getting married and we're very excited about it. We're planning it. So like, I can't wait to share it in the future because what we're doing, I think it's going to be really cool. At the same time, though, it's just funny to me that when I look back on my life, I'm like, wow, the thing I definitely found as like unusual or just not the case in my family, and maybe it could be for you, depending on where you are, your culture, similar to how I felt about it or similar to how Icelanders do it. But here it is very, very normal to just get together, have kids. In fact, some people are having one night stands, having kids, and then having a co-parent. Like, that's not that unusual either. So yeah, it's a very different, more liberalized idea of like the family structure and like how people do things and relationships, but it seems to be working out just fine. So, and even with that, being in a relationship where the person is technically your boyfriend or your girlfriend, Icelanders, I think, feel like saying boyfriend or girlfriend is a bit too casual if you have been together for quite a long time and have children together. So they often will say like "kwonan min" to mean like their woman, or "madorin min," your man. And that in essence kind of gives you the idea that they might be married. Like you can assume that potentially. And even with Holly and I, people will say to him, "Oh, like your wife," or people will say to me, "your husband," and I'll be like, "No, actually, we're not married yet." And I have to like, I feel the need to correct it. So I guess in a way, like it's normalized to me, but it's not completely, because I feel the need to say something. And even like Holly's parents, it would be very normal for me to call them my in-laws, and I do feel like that. We are family, and they're wonderful. But it's also strange for me to say that when we aren't married, but people use that very liberally here. As soon as you're in a relationship, practically, it's like, "Oh, my in-laws." And it's like, "Oh, you're married?" And it's like, "No." And I'm like, "What?" So it's like, it has law in it, in the name, you know? But I digress. It's just something that is considered to be normal, and you can ask to clarify. And I do sometimes just out of curiosity, but it's not something that feels strange to me now. Legs are so stiff. Should have thought about this before getting on the bed. Number 9 is not tipping. And that is a big one, because coming from the United States, this is so a part of going out to eat, or even like different events and things. It's to the point now where maybe it's gotten out of control in the US that you can go to a kiosk and it will even ask you to tip. So like a machine. And it's just like, well, I didn't even interact with a person, right? But whatever. The point is, when I moved in 2016, and even before when I was visiting, the fact that nobody was tipping, I was just like, wait, don't we need to do something extra? And my boyfriend slash, eventual ex-husband at the time was like, no, it's not a part of it. Nobody's going to do that here. And like, it would be actually kind of weird to try and tip. And I was like, oh, strange. And when I got here, I knew that was the case, but I still had to adjust to it. And now I'm often telling people like, hey, when you're coming to visit Iceland, there's no obligation to tip. In fact, you don't have to expect that. Of course, if you go on a tour and you enjoyed your guide and you want to, the guide might accept it, right? But they're not having to make this like waiting for you to tip. They're not obligated to do it. It's more of like a nice to have or a nice gesture to show appreciation. And a lot of people coming to the United States, they struggle with that coming to Iceland, to the point where things have started to shift a little bit, where you'll see in cafes and stuff, little tip jars. And it's so bizarre because we have unions that are advocating on people's behalf, on workers' behalf, in order to make sure people are having livable wages. We don't want a tipping system. We don't want that people are having, like servers or people in the industry of wherever, tipping might be usual, to depend on the customer to make up for the money for their livelihood. And I 1,000% back that. I think it's crazy in the United States that this is normalized, and that people are getting paid as a wait staff $2 and some cents an hour. I mean, I don't know if that's the case now, but I'm just saying, like, back, there's not that long ago where this was the case, and tipping was the only way that you could make up the rest for you to live a life. So I not only am normalized with not tipping, I have to remind myself when I go to the United States to tip. Now, granted, on receipts and stuff, it says that. But even like going to a garage, we had to get our car in a garage in Manhattan because we were going to an appointment. And I forgot totally that you're supposed to tip the guys at the garage. Like, it was just not in my mind because that is not a part of our everyday experience. So yeah, it's to the point where now it's the opposite. Now, when I go back to the United States, I have to be on my like P's and Q's about tipping so that I don't come across as rude. Whereas like here, I had already turned it off. And I don't know any Icelander. I've never encountered an Icelander who tips in Iceland. There might be some, but not any that I know. Number 10 is the Northern Lights are something that are very normal to me now. And it's kind of my favorite thing to say that because I still think they're magical. I still enjoy seeing really strong Northern Lights. There are times where I see kind of faint and I'm just like, oh, okay, it's not that strong tonight, whatever. Like, I'm not gonna get out of bed to go and check it out. And I would have never said something like that back in the day. There were times where I was getting up all times of night. Any instance of potentially seeing the Northern Lights when I first moved for years, I was just like, come on, I want to say some really strong ones because it often is discouraging to people who are coming to visit where they see pictures of insane Northern Lights and they get here and it's kind of like a faint shade of green, maybe it's cloud. I don't know, right? Like that is in the sky, and I understand. And then seeing images that might be heavily saturated, whatever. But I will tell you, there are northern lights. I've seen them right here in our backyard, right from our backyard, where they were so strong. And I was just blown away. In fact, right before I gave birth, I remember there was a super strong Northern Lights storm, if you will, because it was so bright and so much going on. And I didn't have any clothes on, and I just like popped out into the backyard really quick. I was like, no one's gonna see me, and just take a picture. My mom was here, and she was like, girl, what are you doing? I'm hot anyway, right? So I'm just gonna go pop out to the yard. I'm not saying, again, that was the right thing to do, but it made for a story. And yeah, because I was laying in bed when I saw them, and I really wanted to go and capture it. Anyways, that is something that is magical, and I hope for people who are trying to see the Northern Lights that they get a chance to in like the strongest possible, because it will blow you away. And then like dancing in the sky and stuff, it's insane. Different colors. I love it. But it is normal to me to know that that's a part of winter here. Those are 10 things that came to mind. There are probably more if I give it some more thought, but those really stood out as ones that have become from like strange or foreign to me when I first moved to now being completely normal in Iceland after living here for 10 years. To see other videos of what life is like from my perspective in Iceland, I have a link to some videos below, and I'll try and also have it right here and popping up on the screen. Feel free to let me know in the comments below if you have any questions or just comments about what I have shared. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.